In this module, we will talk briefly about the important topics of inheritance and how the cascade works in cascading styles. To understand inheritance, we need to review the inheritance tree. You will remember that we were able to describe the containment relationship by showing the inheritance tree where items lower in the tree are descendants and items higher in the tree are ancestors. Descendants inherit styles from ancestors. This inheritance can save a great deal of time and effort in your writing your CSS, as it avoids having to duplicate styles for descendant tags and properties. However, some properties are not inherited. Placement tags, margins, borders, background colors are not inherited, and that's a good thing because you typically would not want to place a style in, for example, a section and have all of the margins and borders and background colors carry through to all the contained items. Remember that browsers may override inheritance, but they cannot override explicit settings. And when there's a conflict in inheritance, the more specific style wins out over the inherited style. To get an idea of how all of this works, let's take a look at a demo. To understand inheritance, let's return to our page where we have a number of styles. Inside the body of our HTML, we have an article. Inside of that is a section. Inside is an H1, a div, and some spans. We have a second section with paragraphs, and we have an unordered list. And then we have an aside. Finally, we have the body of the aside, which also has paragraphs. There may be some properties and styles that we would like to assign to everything on this page. The easiest way to do that is to add a class to the body and then to go to our Styles section and add that class. The first thing that we'll do is to add a font family. Now I've taken the font family out of the other styles, so the current look of this page before we add the style looks like this. And you can see it's using the default font from the browser. We'd like to set it to use Sego UI. And we'd like that on the whole page. So we'll say font family, Sego UI. Because the browser may not have Sego UI, we'll then give it a fallback of Arial. If it doesn't have Arial, we'll ask it to use Helvetica. Failing all of that, we'll say use any sans serif font. We want the font size to be uniform, and we'll set that to 18 pixels. Let's set a color, and we'll have all of the font be bright blue. We're going to set a width for the body, and we'll set a margin. Save that, bring back the browser, and when we update, we see the margin. We see that many things have turned blue, but our paragraphs have not. That's a clue as to what's wrong. We have a paragraph style, and that paragraph already has a color and a font size in it. And that is overriding the inherited whole page style. If temporarily we comment out the paragraph, save the page, and bring back the browser, now the page style is being applied to the paragraph as well. We can find out what style is being applied in any given location by placing the cursor on the content that we want to examine, right-clicking, and choosing Inspect Element. Notice that the inspector on the left shows us what we're looking at, and on the right we have a number of tabs, one of which is Styles. Let's open this up. This is the computed style, which consists of the explicit styles and the implicit styles, the inherited styles, the default styles. Below the computed styles is the actual style. This is being styled using the pseudoclass nth child. It's also being styled because it inherits from UL, and it's being styled because it inherits from body. And so we see the color is blue because of that inheritance. The font family is set through the inheritance, and the font size is set through the inheritance. The inspector is available in virtually every modern browser, often by right-clicking or by pressing F12. Remember that the elements in an HTML page create a tree, and a given element can be the descendant of numerous other elements. The inherited styles accumulate in each element. So if I have a p tag, which is the child of a div tag, which is the child of a section tag, which is the child of a body, the styles in the body and section and div will all be inherited by the p tag. If there's a conflict between those styles, then the nearest ancestor wins. So in the case we were describing, if there's a conflict between the div and the body, the p tag would inherit from the div. Explicit styles in a particular element win over all other styles. Sometimes, however, it is difficult to know or determine which style should win when there are many conflicting styles. The actual rules for determining this are the specificity rules, which are mildly complex. Here's how you do it. You count the number of ID selectors. Set that to A. You count the number of class and attribute and pseudoclass selectors and set that to B. You set the number of type and pseudo elements to C. You then concatenate A, B, and C to get the specificity. So let's look at the fourth line in the illustration, ul, ol, li.red. There's no ID selector, so A is set to 0. There is one class selector, so B is set to 1. And there are 3 type and pseudo elements. We then take that 0, 1, and 3 and concatenate them, and we get a value of 13. With pound x34y, we have just one ID, so A is set to 1, and B and C are set to 0, but that gives us 100, and a much higher value. Even higher than that is the last entry, which has an ID which sets A to 1, and a pseudo element, which sets C to 1, giving the value 101. You can greatly simplify this system by simply assigning the value 1 for each tag selector, 10 for each class selector, and 100 for each ID selector, and then adding. In the vast majority of cases, this will give you the same answer with a good bit less work. Remember to treat pseudo-elements as 1 point and pseudo-classes as 10. Be sure to use the inspector to examine your styles to double-check that you're getting the style you expect. Let's take a quick look at a demo that shows the difference in specificity. In order to explore specificity, I've added a couple classes, rearranged the HTML a little bit, and this is the result. The first question you have to ask yourself is, how did this line become orange? Let's take a look. Here is a list of books I just read, is simply in a paragraph. If we look at paragraph, the color is black. Clearly something else is affecting that. It's inside the class entry content. Let's see if we can find a style for entry content. Nothing. Coming down one more time, we see that that section also has an ID book list. It's a paragraph within the ID book list. If we go up to our styles, we see there is an ID book list paragraph, and that has a color which has a higher specificity value than the value for the class alone or the paragraph alone. One way to tell that a bit more quickly is to go to the paragraph itself, right-click, inspect that element, and when you inspect that element, you can look at the styles and immediately identify that the style we're seeing is the ID book list paragraph. And that's where we're getting the color. And in fact, it goes so far as to show you that it's overriding the color from the paragraph style itself. IDs are so powerful and overpowering that many CSS authors avoid using IDs altogether and use classes instead. In this module, we saw that descendants inherit their styles from their ancestors, and that those inherited styles accumulate. We also noted that some properties are not inherited. When there are conflicts between two styles, they're resolved by the specificity rules, which can be simplified down to the idea that an ID is worth 100 points, a class 10, and a tag 1. However, rather than trying to compute the specificity rules, we strongly suggest that you use the inspector to determine where the rule that is being applied is defined.